Sometimes that struggle bus just runs right over you. Then it backs up, does it again, and again. Don't draw on your Wacom with one of these. Where's my pen? Stylus. There it is. Howdy y'all. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me again. There are some days that the struggle bus is just more real than others, man. Trying to do some figure drawing here. I have been hammering my way through this piece for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days now. Barely got the line art done. I haven't got the line art done. Not even close. But I'm like just getting to the point where I finally nailed down a design and nailed down what I want to draw. Alright, if you're like me, there's certain aspects as an artist that you're gonna struggle with naturally more than others. Some people it's figure, some people it's expression, some people it's rendering, painting, line art, whatever, what have you. Personally, it's the figure for me. Like the figure and the character, like coming up with a character that's interesting in a pose that's dynamic, or at least applicable to, you know, the story I'm trying to tell. Even if it's not super, you know, complicated pose, just like a simple pose, just sitting there, standing there, or whatever, because we spend most of our time as human beings just kind of sitting, standing, you know, hanging out. We don't do a whole lot of stuff like that. You know, the Spider-Man pose thing is really fun. I mean, when Todd McFarlane started drawing Spider-Man, 90s, 80s, 90s, 92, I think he got hired. And he kind of took over the Spider-Man universe with his artistic style and his dynamicism with his posing and stuff like that. It changed everything about comic books and the way they were drawn, and it really added an element that hadn't been there before in comic books, just so far as dynamic, you know, exciting action. And you can get away with that in Spider-Man comics, Spawn, those type of things. You can get away with it in those kind of character environments and settings, but for most storytelling, it's kind of static. Actually, figure drawing is kind of a static thing. Like I illustrated, the human body, we are not always in motion so far as really dramatic movements and big and broad gestures and stuff like that. It's usually the subtlety that you're trying to capture in figure drawing. The subtlety of the moment, the subtlety of an interaction, the subtlety of the thought or the expression or the movement, you know, that moment of movement. So I've been working on this piece here. It's a character design concept for training angels. Kind of just generic, hey, this is hero character, you know what I mean? This is one of our heroes in his armor, and I'm working out the armor ideas, and I really love when I get into the details of, you know, diving into the armor and getting to play with those kind of things, and really start getting to take over that part of the drawing. That's where I really like it, when I get to detail in it and get to draw on it and get into rendering things out. But working up to that point and coming to the place where I'm pleased with what I see, and I, you know, like what I see, and my anatomy's correct and my proportions are correct, and then I've figured out the costuming, I've figured out the armors and plates and stuff like that. That's the struggle part for me. That's the tedious part. So when it comes to fantasy art, like what I'm working on here, it's not always easy to find a reference, you know, because one of the bigger art hacks out there is find reference for the work you're trying to do. And you can find a lot of reference for gesture, form, proportion, and anatomy. But when it comes to fantastical reference for armor, swords, that kind of things, you can find a little bit, and you can find things that allude to what you're going for. You can find imagery out there, you know, that kind of is in the ballpark of what you're looking for. And that would be my suggestion. If you're having trouble with figure drawing, find reference for the figure. If you're having trouble with anatomy, find anatomy that's close to what you're looking for, emulating, or at least learn muscular structure of the hand and, you know, the muscle group that you're working on or whatever. Work on your composition of your dynamic posing and stuff like that. You can find some reference that may get you close, even old comic books and stuff like that. But when you come to fantastical reference, a lot of it you're going to have to make up out of here. But you can find things in the world of reference that kind of will get you close. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to armor, swords, you can find all kinds of swords and stuff like that. But when it comes to armor and that kind of thing, there's a lot out there that you can use as a ballpark just to get you almost there, and then you can tweak it with your own design style and your own language and your own expression from there to really tell the story that you want to tell. I'm just going to jump into the canvas on this thing and give you the bird's eye view here of what I'm working on, And y'all can join me on this character art journey as I'm working this character. I don't know how far we're going to get. I'm not going to fully render it this time, but I got my pencil out here. Got my own line here. I went through, I mean, gosh, several painful struggles just trying to figure out that this guy did not work at all. So we abandoned that guy. Got some kind of my reference here for the actual character and their costuming. And I actually use this angel reference too. I like this armor. The armor that I had going on here, I really enjoyed the way that looked and came out. It was kind of an older idea, and so I'm going with that as my main inspiration for his armor. So let's make sure we're on the right layer here. Zooming in, enhance. Let's start putting some of this. It's kind of like a Gambison look that I have going on for him. I'm going to be curving over the old peccaroos there. That did not sound correct. Let's say the clavicles. I got a little bit of problems here with the distance and stuff over here, so I'm not really sure what I want to do about that yet. It just kind of comes out here more, and then it's got a leg into there, kind of. I think I'll try to go through this. I'm on my own. I'm on a separate layer here, so there's, you know, no chance of me corrupting the sketch work and doing, you know, sketching on the wrong layer is, oh, it's painful when you do that. Drawing, sketching, or painting on the wrong layer. Let's see, where does that shoulder terminate? We kind of got a dark area over here, so I'm not going to get super detailed. Really on this off side, when you're doing kind of something a little more on the detailed side of things, you need to, I guess, be wise about where you put detail, because you can over detail stuff very easily, and it's something I try to teach my boys, like, you know, and it really adds a little more dynamic interest to a piece if you realize you don't need to go wall to wall with the detail everywhere. You can get away with kind of hinting at detail in certain areas, especially if they're not your focal point, you know, like establishing what is a focal point, what's important to it, and what's not. So you got the basics of the armor over here. Maybe this area right here needs a little work. We're not going to have a whole lot of, maybe cast that in some shadow over there, and there's going to be some underlying armor pieces that you don't really see. Folds in clothing. Wow, that's hard. They are a struggle for me, and especially something like a Gambison, which is really kind of a thick. It's a thicker material, so you may find that what would work on a thin material is not going to work on a thick one, as far as the bends and the folds and all that good stuff. So we're just going to do the best we daggone can, because at the end of the day, unless you're working for a client, then you're just doing art for art's sake, and it just needs to be fun. Get it as close as you can to tell the story you're trying to tell, and have fun with it. I'm gonna find a place to put some gold highlights or gold, like she has, you know, with some little gold pieces, and I'm looking for that cross section between anachronistic, so medieval style, whatever you want to call it, and science fiction. That's what I'm kind of going for with this character. There's going to be some shadow under here. This is part of the Gambison as well. This is where our Gambison meets our armor. And more bulgy muscles. Clip Studio is such a pleasant software to work in. So let's take a quick side quest here and just break down the figure on its own. What does that look like, and how do you flesh it out? Figure drawing. Now, yes, reference is key to this, and I think it's very important. However, if you start to learn how to see the body as three-dimensional shapes first, this being the trunk, kind of like an egg, oddly shaped egg, establishing kind of a rough gesture line for the spine, like this, and then your hips, you want to identify sort of the bowl shape of the hips. This is just how I break them down. This really is a good foundation for just establishing what a character is doing, where they're at in space on the page and in the environment around them, and what their movement is, what their body movement is. And actually from here you could go multiple directions. I could orient the center line of the chest this way so that the chest is pointing down, the front of the pelvis is here, just by simply drawing in some contour lines here and then reshaping my sternum area, bottom of the ribs there, clavicle. Alright, so this is just like the rough identification of the torso here with those simple lines. Okay, so that gives me direction. So we can tell our character is oriented this direction like that. So there's this nice shape. But we could also flip that. So let's back up a little bit. If I remove this and take the line that we drew first, the first thing we did here, and this is the bottom of our rib cage here, clavicle here, our center line of the chest here, center line of the pelvis there, then we have moved the orientation of this figure to an entirely different direction. So instead of contracting and pointing this way, it's expanding and pointing this way. So you have a lot you can do with some very simple line work to reestablish directionality of a character. And then from here, it's really just about blocking in your main shapes. So we're going to have some ball joints for the hips. We're going to have some ball joints for the shoulders really quickly here. And you want to establish the flow. The flow. You don't want too static. You know, not everything's straight across. There's going to be some contrapposto. Contrapposto is the opposition between your hip joints and your shoulder joints. The tilt, as it were, of shoulder and hip. And they are generally contrasting one another. So if the hip is up this way, the shoulders might be down that way. And you think about this as somebody standing. If they're standing and the weight is on this leg, and this leg is in kind of a relaxed position, and they have perhaps a hand gesturing here doing something, and this one kind of on a hip, this is where you get that contrapposto. And that, in a nutshell, is contrapposto, or antiposto is another concept within that, but we won't go too far in the weeds there. So we've established kind of movement using the elements of contrapposto. Let's see if we have good rhythm here. Yes, they're not always completely squared to one another, so it doesn't have to be a dramatic contrapposto. It can be subtle. Alright, so establish that. Now let's put our shape for a head. We're going to be, generally the head is typically aligned with the top of the shoulders and body, kind of in, there is some curve to it, and there is some forward and backward movement in the neck. So far as from, just say this is the shoulders here, you can have some forward movement, and you may have some straight up and down, and there's a slight bit of backward movement, but generally it's not dramatic. The head does not articulate quite as much as the rest of the body. You can do a really dramatic forward articulation like this, but that puts a lot of strain and stretch on the body, and so that it's not a normal type of thing. Center line for the face here, and establish a rough jaw. And we're not going to get too crazy in the forms here. This is just figure drawing basics. Let's say the character's kind of looking that direction. What shall we be doing? Let's do... Now your legs are your foundation, so there's got to be some foundation there. I'm not going to go too deep in the legs, but what is our character doing? That's what we kind of got to think about while we're thinking about this. Let's add a little bit more. Maybe an arm is up here, and there's some gesture going on, some kind here. Maybe admiring an object of great value that was found. Huzzah! Yay! Alright, so the other arm providing a little bit of that contrasting balance, maybe down here, maybe clutching. Let's put a little more expression in the arm, you know. We can do some great expression with the arm and hands and that kind of thing. So it's kind of pointing towards our audience here, a little foreshortening. Let's establish a little bit of gesture and form here with this forehand going forward, or this forward facing hand. There we go. We could work on that a little bit. But so far, with just a few quick scratchy lines, we've established a really nice gesture. We've established a little bit of the form. We've kind of identified where our figure is going to be in space and what they're going to be doing. So we know they're looking this direction, perhaps up here. The body's got some gesture and flow and movement to it. We haven't even really identified male or female yet, and we can actually tweak that out with just proportions of things in the pelvis and shapes and stuff like that we add to the form afterwards. We've got this great movement here, a little bit of articulation in the spine and the back there, to kind of, you know, show some gestural articulation. And then on top of that, we can start working out the form. Facial expressions, all that good stuff. But this is the foundation. Foundation. Find the foundation first. And if you're using reference, great. You'll be able to find this form and the gesture very easily, and then you can exaggerate it as need be. But if you find this foundation, if you can get this nailed down, then you can start to tweak from there. And I find that as I go, sometimes I will smooth out or undo a lot of the great form and gesture that I've put into something. So you got to kind of train yourself not to do that. Like, don't get rid of all the fun parts that you've added and the fun elements you've added to this form and movement by over rendering or oversimplifying the shapes. Keep the shapes dramatic. Let's put some hips there, and then let's get some meaty. Alright, almost immediately our character is starting to take some feminine characteristics here. And you got muscles in the back there, you got muscles in the back there, you got muscles in the front here. Really start to build up your musculature slowly. Well, that is not going to work right here. This situation may not work. Let's work up here. Where's the fold? There's always a fold in the body. There's a crease point here, around in here, where the body moves the most on the spine. So find that. Thin it out where it needs to be thinned out. Maybe even dramatize the form a little bit more. Establish your him. Him. If it's female. Shoulders. These are the big major muscle groups that stick out the most. Head's a little small on that one. So let's go with a more anime-ish or character style head. There we go. That to me starts to look more female because of the larger proportion of head to body. Okay, let's get that going for us. I don't like where that leg's going in space, so we can adjust that. This is your foundation right here. So try to do that. If you can do that, then the rest of it is the really painful part of trying to work out the details and the muscles and the, costuming and all that good stuff. But if you lay a good foundation, you at least have a starting point. Thank you for joining me again. Appreciate you stopping by. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And just thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you're struggling with character art specifically, if you're sitting there getting run over by that struggle bus with your character art, I would say break it down into small pieces. Work on gesture, find reference if you can, your forms, find reference if you can. Your anatomy and proportions, find a reference that's close if you can. And then start worrying about the details. Start worrying about the armature of the actual character itself, looking at it three-dimensionally. And what you're trying to say with the shape language of maybe some fantastical armor that you're coming up with, or a sword or whatever. And just find the reference that you can that's closest to that. And if you can't find reference for something, you're just going to have to struggle through like everybody else. Just draw it and 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 draw it some more. That's one of the beauties of working digitally, though, is there's almost an endless ability to correct and redraw. It's very forgiving. Love that. All right, this guy is, I mean, we're getting somewhere, but my goodness, I just noticed another mistake. I'm not going to sleep tonight.